Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is McKay Allen. I'm the Director of Content and Communications at Convirza, formerly Log My Calls. Thanks for being on this webinar with us today. We appreciate it, and we especially appreciate Phil Frost, the COO of Main Street ROI, for joining us today. We'll introduce him more fully in a moment. First, a couple of quick items just to set the scene a little bit, and then also to let you know how today's webinar will proceed. Number one, who is Convirza and why do we do these webinars? Number one, Convirza used to be Log My Calls. Some of you probably know us as Log My Calls or knew us as Log My Calls. We changed our name about 4 or 5 weeks ago to Convirza. Basically what we do is we provide call analytics. We integrate into Google Analytics and other analytics platforms, and we can tell you which ads, campaigns, and keywords generate phone calls to your business. We also analyze those phone calls with voice recognition technology and can give you lead scores for those phone calls, give you data about whether or not those calls have resulted in appointments or revenue, things like that. And then we also, as I said, push that data into analytics platforms like Google Analytics or bid management tools like Acquisio or Kinshu, other tools like that, or even CRMs. So it's a great way, if you get any volume of phone calls, it's a great way to actually incorporate that into your marketing ROI calculations, because phone calls are often left out even though they're becoming more and more frequent to pretty much every business out there. Second is the question people ask is, why do you do all these webinars? So we have 2 webinars a week that we host, and we ask people like Phil with Main Street ROI. We had a webinar yesterday with Fred Valais, who is one of the first employees at Google and an AdWords expert. We host these webinars because they're great content. And we have fantastic experts come on who can teach us about marketing tactics and tools and tips that they've used throughout their career. So we wanted to provide that content to other marketers who were sophisticated. So that's our goal. And then in terms of housekeeping for today's webinar, this webinar is going to be recorded. So don't worry about taking notes. You can access the recording after the webinar is over. We'll email that to you tomorrow. So that's number one. Also, we encourage you to ask questions. Please use the question bar on your GoToWebinar panel there. Just type a question in, and we will address those to Phil after the conclusion of his presentation. So to test this out, the little question area, so you know exactly where it is, I want to have you type something in there. In fact, type in exactly where you're calling in from today into the question bar. I'm calling in from Salt Lake City. That's where our headquarters are. We also have an office in Southern California, but I'm based in Salt Lake at our headquarters. Phil is calling in from New York City, where he is based. So we have people typing in now. So we've got people from New York as well. We've got Baton Rouge, we've got Irvine, we've got Austin, London, Texas City, Texas, Houston, Richmond, a couple places in Virginia, Denver, Raleigh, Irvine, Atlanta, Newton, New Hampshire. I know where Newton, New Hampshire is, Cheryl. I've been there. Lexington, South Carolina, London, several from London, Vegas, Nigeria, Wisconsin, Long Island, all over the place. This is great. We've got a big crowd on the webinar today, several hundred people, so it should be a great discussion. So with that, I want to introduce Phil Frost. I think this is the, I don't know, 3rd or 4th, maybe more than that webinar we've done together. Phil's the COO and founder of Main Street ROI. They're a great agency and consultancy based in New York City, but with employees all over the country that really help small and medium-sized businesses with every aspect of their marketing. They've just done a great job for a long time. They're growing like crazy. And the reason is because Phil and his partner in business, Pete, do a great job. And so, Phil, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it, sir. And I think, like I said, I think this is we've done multiple webinars together. What is it, 3 or 4, maybe even more than that?
Yeah, I think we're up to 4 here. 4 or 5 would be my guess.
Your estimation there?
But,
good stuff.
Yeah.
I just gave you control of the screen, Phil. So whenever you're ready, go ahead. And then, like I said, it looks like we got a big crowd today, so it should be a fun time. So Phil, go ahead. Thanks again for doing this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, McKay, and thank you for having me on here. Convirza, got the pronunciation correct there. So McKay, you can actually see my screen now? We're all set there?
Yeah, you're good. I can see your deck.
Perfect. So we're going to be talking about Google Analytics made simple, how to measure your ROI. And again, I'm Phil Frost, founder and COO of Main Street ROI. McKay already did the housekeeping. I'll just reiterate, you can type questions into the GoToWebinar window, And I always recommend turning off distractions. Definitely turn off email, your cell phone. Just get the most out of this. If you focus in on the next hour, or actually less than an hour here, that way you don't have to go back and revisit everything a second or third time. So here's our agenda. We'll touch on why metrics matter, why you should even be using a tool like Google Analytics to track your marketing metrics, why you should use Google Analytics specifically versus all the other tools out there. We'll walk through how to get Google Analytics set up the correct way. And then I'll walk through how to report on your key metrics, and more importantly, really walk through what are the important metrics to be tracking in your marketing campaigns. And then we should have time for live Q&A at the end of this. So again, my name is Phil Frost. Over 9 years of experience. I am a self-proclaimed data geek. I actually studied engineering in college, so I find Google Analytics fun and exciting, and I know most people online probably do not find data that exciting, and you might get bored by it. And because of that, the reason I think this presentation is important is because I'll actually show you some shortcuts so that you're not getting lost in the data when you log into Google Analytics. There's way too much information in Google Analytics. It's easy to spend an entire day sifting through everything, and really my goal here today is to just make your time as efficient as possible, so when you log in, you can get in, get out, and know what the key action items are to improve on your marketing campaigns. And finally, my thought leadership has been featured in top media sites like Forbes, Inc., Amex, as well as Mashable. And I am also the very proud father of those cute kids there. That's my daughter Violet on the right, my son, my very new son Emmett. He's just 2.5 months old, and that's my wife Erin. And we live on the Upper West Side of New York City. As McKay said, I'm calling in from our office here on 23rd Street in New York City. And this is a picture in the Central Park Zoo. If you ever get a chance to go out there, highly recommend it, and try to get there around, I think it's 11 or 11:30 a.m. They have a showing with the sea lions here. They do all those cool tricks where they throw frisbees to the sea lions and stuff like that. All right, so why metrics matter? I think most people online know that metrics are important. I'll just quickly touch on this. So the way I see it is Google Analytics is really your marketing report card. And I just mentioned I have a daughter. She goes to daycare, and they actually give her a report card, which sounds crazy, but I love it because twice a year I see her progress, and without that report card, I really would not know if she was really on track to hit all of her key milestones, where are the areas that she does need to improve. For example, I know that she's really good at sitting down and focusing on a task, which is great. She's excelling there, but not exactly excelling at the potty training. So I know we need to work on that area a little bit more at home as well as at daycare. And that analogy holds true with your marketing. Obviously, you need some kind of report card so that you can look at it and say, okay, where are we excelling, or where do we really need to focus our resources and actually improve? So that's the way you should view Google Analytics. It's your report card, and at the end of this training, you'll now know how to go into Google Analytics and actually use it as a report card. And it's also important to identify which marketing channels are your superstars. The analogy here would be sports superstars, and if you're a sports fan, you probably know the stats of all of your favorite players, and that's really, you should take that analogy and apply that to your marketing. You should really know the stats of all of your key marketing channels. And again, we'll talk about which stats are important, because similarly in sports, not all the stats really matter. You don't need to know how many times a batter actually went to the plate. That stat's not really important. You want to know what's their batting percentage, for example. So knowing what to focus on is really important, and then actually identifying those metrics and then tracking those to see which marketing channels are performing. And then finally, really, really important key takeaway here, that traffic does not equal sales. That's really not the point of Google Analytics. It's not to say, okay, last month you got 2,000 visitors or 20,000 visitors. Traffic alone does not equal conversions, leads, and sales. So you really need to have a process in place to be tracking those conversions. And McKay already touched on their tracking tool, their call tracking, that actually shows you phone calls and phone call leads right in your Google Analytics platform. And it's really important to have insight like that rather than just tracking your traffic. All right, so you're probably wondering why set up Google Analytics versus all the other tools out there, because there are quite a few analytics tools. The first one, it's free, and who doesn't love that? It is actually completely free to use. You might think, oh, it's free, so it's not very powerful. It is actually one of the most powerful tools out there for tracking. Secondly, it works well with others, and by that I mean it integrates with other tools fairly easily. Again, McKay touched on Convirza's tool, and their call tracking easily integrates into Google Analytics. So different tools will integrate. It obviously integrates with other ad platforms like Google AdWords, since Google owns both AdWords and Analytics. It also automatically will track a lot of social media traffic and easily show you and combine that type of marketing channels that you might be using. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a minute once we start digging into the reports. Key takeaway there is just it works well with others. It integrates with other programs very easily. And it's also not going anywhere. I think that's important. You don't want to set up a tracking platform and invest all that time and then have that company actually go out of business, or something changes quickly. Google most likely not going anywhere anytime soon, so you do have that security. All right, now we're going to go through the 4 steps to set up Google Analytics correctly. It's very easy to get set up, and you just go to google.com/analytics and create an account, and then Google Analytics will give you the code that you then copy and paste on every single web page of your site. That's important to remind you. You want to put it on every single page. If you don't put the code on a page, then you won't be able to track that particular page. So that's easy, and that's 99% of businesses get through that step, but that's not the most important step, because you need to set up goals or conversions. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I see, businesses not taking the time to set up their goals, because again, traffic does not equal sales. The whole point of using Google Analytics is to identify your top marketing channels or find opportunities to improve, and you can't do that unless you're tracking the conversions for each of your marketing channels. You might be wondering, what is a website conversion? For e-commerce websites, that would be an online sale. That's very easy to track since it's all happening online. If you're a services type business, then you'll be tracking contact form submissions, or people requesting quotes or scheduling demos, scheduling appointments. you might have a free report on your website, and you'd want to track those free report requests. And then obviously, we want to be tracking phone calls, and with a tool like Convirza, that would integrate and automatically show you the phone call conversions right in Google Analytics. Now, there's one more step here, which is to use what's called the URL builder. And if you just go to google.com and Google URL builder, it'll be the first result. I don't know why it's this crazy URL, but there it is if you do want to write it down. But I recommend just going to Google, type in URL builder, click on that first result, and it's a very simple form. And you just have to complete that form. You put in your web page URL, and then you'll want to fill in the source of the traffic. It might be, let's say, Facebook. It might be paid traffic. So you could put that it's cost per click or CPC, and then you give it a campaign name, whatever that promotion is that you're running, and then you'll get the URL builder will just automatically give you this code, and you'll see I just used a test.com domain, and then it puts a question mark, and it has what are called these UTM parameters. So you can see source, Facebook, medium, CPC, and then campaign, I just said demo. Now this is really important because Google Analytics uses that information to then identify the source of traffic, the medium, as well as the campaign name, and that allows you to slice and dice the reports based on those different tracking parameters. So again, you can just Google URL builder, and it's a very simple form. This is really important for email marketing. You'll want to put the source for possibly your newsletter, and then the medium would be email. So it obviously depends on the channel that you're using. That's how you would name the different parameters. But the point here is to use the URL builder to specify where the traffic's coming from and tell Google Analytics, hey, I want to track this traffic, and it's coming from Facebook or it's coming from email, and that way you tell Google exactly how to categorize that traffic. This will make more sense once I get to the reporting section, so bear with me there. But here is URL Builder 101. UTM source is the source of the website traffic. UTM medium, type of the website traffic, so that might be email, for example, would be a medium. UTM campaign is just the name of the campaign that you're running. And then finally, I already mentioned this, Google Analytics uses that data to then populate the reports in Google Analytics. Now, it is important to note, you don't have to use URL Builder. Google Analytics is fairly good at identifying traffic. If the traffic came naturally from Google search, for example, organic search or SEO traffic, then Google's very good at knowing where that traffic came from and then categorizing that in Google Analytics. What Google Analytics is not good at is knowing that it came from email, for example, just because there's so many different ways people can get email and then actually make it to your site. It's hard to identify and know exactly that traffic came from email. So email is a great example of where you want to use the URL builder. And then different types of ad campaigns you'll want to specify with these UTM tracking parameters. Okay, the fourth step in terms of the setup is only for e-commerce businesses. If you're not an e-commerce business, you don't need to take this step. But again, I recommend just Googling e-commerce analytics, and unfortunately you have to get to this crazy URL, and it's definitely a technical setup. it's fairly technical. You would need a web developer to get this installed. But once you do, it will start tracking all of your revenue. And again, once I start showing the reports, you'll see how analytics will show you the revenue per marketing channel, and that leads us to how we can actually calculate return on investment for all of our marketing channels. So this is only worth setting up if you're an e-commerce website. If you don't have any online transactions, you can ignore this step. All right. Once you're set up, then you obviously want to start have some kind of process in place for reviewing the data. Depending on how much traffic you're getting to your site, you want to have a frequency that makes sense. If you're not getting that much traffic, then it doesn't make sense to log in every single day. You're just not going to have that many changes going on. So you have to pick a frequency that makes sense for you and the amount of traffic you're getting. It could be at the very least, I'd go with monthly, and then maybe every other week might be more appropriate. And then for very high trafficked websites where you're actually making a lot of changes and doing a lot of testing, you could get into weekly check-ins or even twice a week. But let's take a look at which metrics are important. And the first concept that I think is important is the difference between aggregate versus channel metrics. And one of the most common questions I receive is generally regarding aggregate data, and people will ask me, my overall website bounce rate is X%. What's going on, or my time on site is only 1 minute. What's wrong? Unfortunately, aggregate metrics do not really tell you anything, and I just recommend you basically avoid looking at them altogether. And I'll give you some examples here. So all monthly website traffic, you can obviously look at that, but it doesn't necessarily tell you much about how your marketing is performing. Again, your total or average website bounce rates, average time on site across all of your marketing channels, that doesn't really tell you what's working and where you need to improve, because it's just combining all of the traffic into that one stat. And I find this is where a lot of businesses get a little hung up on these metrics, their overall bounce rate or their overall time on site, overall traffic. That's definitely not where you want to focus. If you're doing any type of online advertising, you want to specifically look at that advertising campaign and that channel, and really laser focus your analysis just on that traffic. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And here are some examples of channel metrics. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, for example, if you're investing in SEO, you want to look at your organic search traffic trends over time. You want to know, is your organic search traffic increasing or decreasing? Obviously, if you're investing in SEO, you want to see that trend going up. Page search traffic conversion rates. So again, now you're just laser focused on your paid search traffic. So this might be Google AdWords, search ads, and you want to track conversion rates over a period of time. And then that'll tell you, are your conversion rates improving? Are you testing different landing pages, making tweaks to your website, and that's increasing your conversion rates? Or is it actually decreasing your conversion rates, in which case you obviously need to address that. These are just fairly random examples, referral traffic bounce rates over time. So not just looking at your overall website bounce rates, because that doesn't really tell you anything. Really hone in on just the referral traffic or just the traffic from a particular website that is referring you traffic, and see if the bounce rates are increasing or decreasing over time. That would indicate if the bounce rates are let's say they're increasing, that would indicate maybe a mismatch in your content and what might be promised on the site that's referring you that traffic. They might be promising something and you're not actually delivering on it, and you want to obviously dig in and fix that problem. And then we've already touched on this number of conversions per marketing channel, and that gets into the discussion of return on investment and being able to track which marketing channels are actually driving leads and sales. So here's an example problem. I mentioned this before. It's just very common. I hear people, just looking at the bounce rate and saying, hey, my bounce rate increased from, let's say, 20% to 50%. What happened? And if you just look at your aggregate data, you really have no idea what happened. The answer is to actually dig into the channel metrics. So you need to actually look at the different channels and see which channels actually had that increase in bounce rate, because it's highly likely that not all the channels did increase. You probably, in this example, maybe one channel jumped up to 75%, whereas some other ones actually stayed the same. So again, within a channel, did the bounce rates increase for all the devices? So that's another way to slice the data. So not just getting into the channel metrics, but then diving in a little bit deeper into the actual device. And this is becoming more and more important as just more of our prospects and customers start using their mobile devices to access our sites. We now need to take a look at the traffic behavior per device. And again, the answers are going to be in the channel reports, and that's what we're going to talk about. So here are the 3 steps to actually getting key insights in Google Analytics. And again, the goal here is to get you in and out of Google Analytics. I think most people online do not want to spend all day digging into the data. And if you follow these 3 steps, you should be able to be as efficient as possible when you log in. So the first thing we're going to do is take a high-level overview of your marketing. We'll look at the top marketing channels by traffic, top marketing channels by user behavior, and then top marketing channels by conversions. I'll give you the 3 steps, and then we'll actually dive into these reports. Then we want to review the trends in each of the marketing channels. And then we want to take a look at the landing page performance per marketing channel. So again, kind of starts off with the high-level overview. From there, we'll actually dig in a little bit deeper and dive into a individual marketing channel. And then we'll look at the data in that marketing channel. And then we'll look at the different pages that people are landing on per marketing channel. So the way we'll get that high-level overview is with what's called the channels report. And again, why use this report? It's going to give you the overview of all your marketing channels. This is by far my favorite report to run. How you're going to run this, you'll go to Acquisition, All Traffic Channels, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. And then I already mentioned this, but one of the advanced tactics is to use the URL builder, and that will improve the accuracy of this report. So here's a screenshot of how to actually get to the channels report. So on the left, when you log into Google Analytics, on the left-hand side is your navigation bar, and you can see one of the main navigation items is called Acquisition, and you can see those 2 arrows pointing to the right. You'll want to click on that, and then you'll want to click on all traffic, and then right underneath all traffic is this channels report. And let me see. So above the channels report, just so you know what's going on here, we've got the actual graph of visits. That's what that's showing, and then below the graph is the table of your channels, and that's really where I want you to focus. So to get your bearings here, you go to channels report, and then you just scroll down, and now we're in the channel report here. So this is the table of all of your different marketing channels. You can see on the left column we have paid search. Number 2 is called other, and that's actually other advertising that basically needs to be better tracked using the URL builder. Then we have your referral traffic. That's all traffic coming from other websites to your website. We have email traffic. I already touched on that. So email is everything that you specify with the medium equals email. So that, again, that's highlighting the importance of the URL builder. Organic search is automatically tracked, and you can see that's your SEO traffic. Direct traffic, I also want to highlight that because direct traffic, you know, I'm sure you can figure it out. It's people going directly to your site, but it's not just that. There's other ways where it looks like it's direct traffic, but it's not. And a great example is if you use Microsoft Outlook for your email and you click on a link, it will automatically open a browser window and go straight to that website in that URL. That looks like a direct visit. So if you're not using the URL builder and you're not specifying your email traffic with the UTM parameters, then all of your email traffic, well, not all of it, but a lot of it will look like direct traffic. So it'll get lumped in there, unfortunately. Other advertising, as it says, other advertising, you've got display advertising, and then social. And that's all the social media traffic. So again, this is a high-level overview of all of your different marketing channels. And the first section, the sessions, really, those are your visits. So a session just means somebody coming to your site. Whenever they load up a page, that starts a session. I don't know why they call it that, but that's essentially a website visitor. And you can see this, by default, they'll sort your channels by the most popular, or the channels that get the most traffic. So in this example, paid search has the highest traffic. So that's one of the most important channels for this particular business. Followed by other, which again is it basically it's telling us that we need to better track that traffic using the URL builder. And then we've got referral traffic and email. So that's the visits, and then in the second column section here is behavior, and this is where we can see the bounce rates. And I do want to highlight something here. So at the top, you've got the overall bounce rate of 46%, and then if you scroll down, you can see other advertising actually has a bounce rate of 88%. So it's really important to not look at those aggregate metrics because that's not telling you much. You really need to look per channel, and you can see, for example, the referral channel has a bounce rate of only 27%. So that 46% overall bounce rate is very deceiving. You need to look a little bit closer at what's going on. Likewise with number of pages per visit and average time on site or session duration. And then finally, conversions by marketing channel. Again, this is where we get into calculating return on investment. In this example, it's an e-commerce website, so we can actually see the revenue in here. And this is what happens once you install the e-commerce analytics. the revenue data will start to populate in here, and you can clearly see paid search is driving the majority of the revenue. Then we've got other, and then email marketing is a big channel. What's interesting when you look at the conversion rates, the other advertising has a 0.02% conversion rate, so that's getting killed, versus email marketing with a 1.27% conversion rate. That's doing fairly well. And you can see again, if you look at that average aggregate conversion rate of 0.56, that really does not tell you the full picture. You have to look at this channel report and really dig into individual channels. And I do want to mention, so conversions right now, I'm looking at an e-commerce business, so the revenues there. For a services type business, you'll want to set that to goals, and then you'll see all of the different goals. So you might want to set that to the phone calls. We talked about that with integrating with Convirza. Or you might have request a quote or request or schedule an appointment type form leads. And you could basically, instead of transactions there, just think of those as leads, and it's the same analysis, looking at where are your top channels, which ones are driving the most leads, and then look at your conversion rate. Where do you have a good solid conversion rate, or what needs to be improved? Like in my example here, the other advertising is just really not performing well, and that's an area that we'd want to address, figure out how can we increase that conversion rate, or possibly stop advertising altogether on those ad networks because it's just not working. Okay, so once you've run this report, I already mentioned this is the high-level overview. Then we want to dig into individual channels. And what you do is you literally just click on the channel. So if you want to dig into paid search, you would click on paid search, and that brings us to the individual channel graphs. And the goal here, we want to see trends over time, and we can actually identify what's working or not working over time. To do that, I just mentioned you'll want to click on the actual channel, and by default it will only show you one metric, but an advanced tactic here I'll show you, you can actually add another metric there, and that'll give you much more insight. This is a question if you want to try to answer what's wrong with this picture. You can see, so this is an actual channel graph report for paid search. We've got sessions versus conversion rate, and I'll give away the answer here. You can see sessions going up, so we're actually ramping up paid search advertising, but you can see conversion rates are plummeting. So that highlights a very important problem. Conversion rates are going down as we're ramping up traffic. That needs to be addressed. You obviously don't want to keep ramping up and spending more money if your conversion rates are actually plummeting. You want to get that addressed, to turn that trend around. To add a second dimension, you just actually click on this box here. So that's why I've got that big arrow. Another interesting graph to look at would be visits versus bounce rate. You might see some trends here. And this, again, is an interesting graph. We've got, this is the display channel. So display advertising, you can see traffic dipped a little bit, then went back up, but the bounce rate has steadily been increasing. And that typically that'll indicate some kind of change that you made to the website. Possibly in July, there was a change made to the site that just negatively impacted the bounce rate, and more people are just quickly bouncing. Another problem could be that the ads were actually changed, and now you're possibly promising something in your ads and not actually delivering that when they get to the landing page and start reading the website. they're disappointed, and then they quickly bounce. The goal here is just to be able to identify that trend. Once you do, then you need to take that extra step and actually address that problem. And then the third report is the landing pages by channel. If you're not familiar with the phrase landing page or the term landing page, that's the page that someone lands on right after they click on your ad or your promotion. You typically hear people talk about landing pages for ad campaigns. That's the page right after they click on the ad, they land on the landing page. But that also applies to any other marketing channel. It could be an email marketing landing page. So you send an email, they click on that link, they go to that email landing page. So every channel essentially has landing pages, and you want to review those pages and obviously try to improve on those, so that you obviously want to drive down bounce rates and increase conversion rates. So this is actually located in a different section of analytics. I'll show you in a minute. It's under behavior, and then site content, and then landing pages. And this is another advanced tactic to add segments so that you can just look at landing pages for different channels. So again, if you log into Google Analytics, you'll see something like this with the navigation on the left, and you'll see behavior with a little icon that looks like a web page, and then underneath behavior we have site content, and then underneath site content we have landing pages. And again, those are all of the landing pages where people are entering your website. And if you want to add a segment, that's where this arrow is pointing. You can see to the left of that, it says all sessions, so you're not segmented at all. You're looking at all of the visitors. And then if you click on add segment, you can actually segment your traffic. And I have two examples here. If you just wanted to look at organic traffic landing pages, you'd need to check that box. Or if you wanted to just look at paid traffic landing pages, you need to check that box to the left of paid traffic. And then you click apply, and you'll have different segments in the report, and it will clearly label it as organic traffic or paid traffic and show you the stats for each. So here's an example. Again, above this table is the graph that I showed you just a second ago. So then you just scroll down, and you'll see the first column shows you the different landing pages, and it's very similar to the report before, and you can see visitors per landing page. You can see the behavior, and again you can see how the bounce rate just varies greatly across the site and across the different landing pages. One that jumps out at me here is the 91% bounce rate. Again, I'm just hammering this point, but if you just looked at the 51% overall aggregate bounce rate, you would never know that you have this page right here that's just getting killed. Nearly everyone is just leaving that page, so you want to address that. And then again, you have to the right your e-commerce stats if you have an e-commerce site, or this would say goals if you had a services business, you're not doing online transactions. And with this, you can see where your top landing pages are, and that's really where you want to focus to try to improve on those pages, to try to improve the conversion rates and drive more, in this case, sales for e-commerce, and for a services business, that would be more leads. Okay, so a quick recap of what we just went through here. Very important to add Google Analytics on every single page. That is a mistake I see. Just, for example, putting it on the home page. You want to put it on every single page. You definitely want to set up goals. Do not skip that step because traffic does not equal sales. We went over URL Builder and how to set up your different URLs for example, in your email campaigns, you want to make sure those are tracking as email in your channels report. We touched on e-commerce analytics. I would just shoot that link over to your developer. It is fairly technical to get that set up, but definitely not. It should not be very costly to get set up. I do want to clarify that any web developer should be able to set up e-commerce analytics. We talked about reviewing the channels report to get that high-level overview of what's working, which campaigns are your superstars, and then clicking into individual channels and actually looking at the trends in those channel reports, and then looking at your top landing page performance to find any issues with your landing pages, find your top landing pages, and focus your attention on the landing pages that are actually getting traffic and getting conversions, and try to improve on that conversion rate. And with that, we will get to live Q&A.
Awesome. Phil, thanks for the presentation. It was really good, and we have a ton of questions, so I'm excited to go through these. We've got about 12 minutes to get through questions, so we'll get through as many as we can, everyone. Okay, let's start. First of all, we have a lot of questions asking if the webinar has been recorded and if they'll have access to that recording. Yes, and you'll also have access to the slides. I'll have Phil send those to me directly after this webinar. We'll post them on SlideShare, and we'll send that link as well, if that works with you, Phil.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, here we go. So Richard is asking about Google Tag Manager. He says, I thought Tag Manager will help implement the code on the site without pasting the code on every page. Is that true? How does Tag Manager work?
So Tag Manager, that is a great tool. And for anyone that's not familiar with that, it basically gives you one place to put all of your different code or codes. For example, Google Analytics code, you might be advertising in Google AdWords, you want to have conversion code, and then you might advertise in Facebook, and now you have some Facebook tracking code that you need to install. It gets a little hectic to have all this code flying around on your site, and it gets annoying to have to send that over to a developer every time. So Google Tag Manager makes it fairly easy for anyone like you and me to actually go in there without any coding experience and add code to your site. Basically, the answer is yes, you can certainly use Google Tag Manager, but you would need to add Google Tag Manager to every page of your site first, and then you would add the Google Analytics code to Google Tag Manager.
Okay.
So hopefully that made sense. It basically adds
Richard, re-ask that or ask a follow-up if that doesn't make sense. But yeah, I think it makes sense, Phil.
Okay.
Myra Ash, she says this, is if running Facebook ads, we would build this URL in the Google URL Builder and paste that URL into the Facebook ad. So I think she's specifically asking about Google URL Builder and where to post the URL,
right,
which is in the ad itself.
Yep, she's absolutely correct. So if you're running a Facebook ad campaign, highly recommend you go to the URL Builder, make the source Facebook, and then make the medium. I generally use CPC, and that's cost per click. There are some other different mediums that you can use, and then the other mandatory field is campaign. So maybe it's a 50% off sale, then you just write 50% off sale, something like that.
Wonderful. Okay, Glenn asks, I'm not sure what he's referring to. He says, can this be set up by product or business line? We set to sell travel insurance, various loans, auto glass memberships, etc. I assume he's talking about goals or funnels within Google Analytics. I'm not sure. Maybe he's talking about specific landing pages. Glenn, if you could clarify that question, that'd be great. We have several people asking how Google Analytics tracks phone calls from a website. I can answer that, or you can take that, Phil, if you want to talk about how that displays within Google Analytics with a call tracking tool like ours.
I'll definitely let you take that one.
Okay. So basically what our system does is we sort of fool Google Analytics into counting a phone call as a page view. So you would basically associate a certain page of your site with all of the phone calls that come through your system. And so our system can analyze which precise pages are generating calls and have those show up in Google Analytics, or it can basically spoof a phone call and basically fool Google Analytics into thinking it's a web visit. So you would have a certain source that you've specifically labeled as phone calls that would show up within Google Analytics as a web visit, but would actually be a phone call coming from our system. So they've made it not terribly easy with phone calls, but we figured out a way to sort of fool them into tracking phone calls. So you need to have a Google Analytics account. You also need to have an account with us, and the integration's already pre-built. So the data flows in there really easily, and there's setup instructions as you go through it. And there's a lot of our clients that do that. They just want the data in one place. So you don't get a lot of advanced metrics within Google Analytics about phone calls. You essentially only get whether or not one happened and how long it was. But you don't get data like lead score that our system extracts or missed opportunity, things like that. Saibi asks, she says, I see very low bounce rates for our site across all channels, less than 2%. I know there is an issue there. Is it because of all the events we are tracking on the load of every page? I'm not sure I understand that question. Do you understand that question, Phil? I think she's concerned her bounce rates are too low and wondering if there's an issue with the back end of some sort. I'm not sure. I think that may be what she's getting at.
Yeah, usually if you do have a super low bounce rate, you know, that is a little concerning that something wrong is happening, and it would indicate to me that you could be automatically like sending people to another page, because a bounce is somebody comes and then leaves that same page. But if you somehow force people to another page or force the Google Analytics code to look like you went to another page, then that would artificially drive down your bounce rate to nearly zero. And it sounds like that's what's happening, and it sounds like she has some advanced code on there that's probably tricking Google into thinking, hey, this person went to another page, in which case there wouldn't be a bounce anymore.
Ah, interesting. That makes sense. We have a lot of people asking about benchmarks. I mean, what do you think is a good bounce rate? What is a bad bounce rate? How do you judge those things? And obviously it depends on the type of site, the industry, as well as precisely what you're offering. But what are good bounce rates, as well as traffic source, probably more importantly, but what are good and bad bounce rates in your mind, Phil?
Yeah, you touched on the key issues with that question. There are so many variables, but I'll give you an example. Let's say you're advertising and sending people to a landing page that is offering something for free. You can generally get, let's say, a 20%, 30, even upwards of 40% conversion rate. Mm-hmm. And that would basically mean that, let's say, 60, 70, 80% are just bouncing, or a little bit less because they might be clicking around to other pages. But let's say you're driving people to a page that now is offering a paid product. Now you can get much more of those folks actually bouncing. In terms of, it's very hard to say an average or industry standard bounce rate. I would focus in on the conversion rate. In terms of average there, I just mentioned something free could be 20 to even upwards of 40%. We start getting into paid conversion rates. Now you're looking at maybe 1, 2, 3% conversion rate.
Mm-hmm. Right. In my mind, it really depends. There's a lot of variables, Phil, but as you know, but I agree. I think it mostly depends on the traffic source, because if you're doing paid search, your bounce rate's going to be very high. But if people are just coming to your home page and they're organic searchers, I mean, your bounce rate could be very low. Like, for example, on our new site, our bounce rate is 20, 30%. Our old site, it was a little bit higher than that. So it really depends on, in my mind, the traffic source is probably the largest variable.
Right. Yeah, and actually in that slide where I was showing the different channels, the referral traffic, generally referral traffic has low conversion rates, and that was, I think it was about 25% in that slide. I have to go back. But that, again, is based on the source of traffic, and a referral is similar to a recommendation. Somebody's kind of clicking over because they got recommended over to this other site. They're less likely to bounce versus, like McKay said, paid search traffic. They're more likely to bounce because they're in that shopper mindset, and they want to take a look at all the different options.
So we have two more questions that I want to address. The first one is from Mike. He says, we're a small company looking for more leads in an area of about 125,000 population. In your professional opinion, which I don't know that that's pretty authoritative. He's looking for you for professional opinion, Phil. I'm impressed. He says, which is work best for you to drive traffic to your website for obtaining leads? TV, radio, PPC, paid search? What do you recommend for a small company looking for leads in a certain geographic area? And it really depends on the industry, and there's a lot of variables there, but see if you can take a stab at that, Phil.
Yeah, again, it would depend on the industry. Another key variable, especially when you're considering advertising, is your value per sale or your price point for your product or service. A lot of times when you run the numbers, it's just going to be impossible to make it profitable if you have a very low value per customer versus your competition. And that should make sense, because if they have a really high value, they're able to afford they can pay more to acquire those customers, and they're going to naturally drive up the cost per clicks and the cost to advertise in any ad platform. So basically the name of the game, if you're looking to advertise, is to drive up your value per sale, your value per customer, and that allows you to actually compete and buy the media that you need profitably. So that I would look at your numbers in that sense. If advertising does not make sense, then your options get limited, and you need to look at possibly SEO, look at partnerships to drive traffic, and it might not work paid search-wise, but you might want to look at Facebook and see if the numbers make more sense on their platform.
Yeah, I agree. And he clarified, too, a little bit with the industry retail window, and retail and average ticket price is about $9,000. So that's a big item, Mike. So here's my suggestion, too, to piggyback on what Phil said. Keep in mind, too, especially in retail window, that most people in those scenarios don't necessarily want to fill out a web form. They want to call you and they want to talk to you. Because when they're talking about spending that kind of money, they really want to have a conversation. And so make sure I guess my 2 cents is make sure you're looking at the right metrics. Like things like bounce rates, things like that probably don't matter as much in your industry as producing a high number of good quality phone calls. So just keep that in mind, Mike, as you go forward with your marketing. What channels are going to produce phone calls for you, not necessarily which ones are going to generate form fills. So just my 2 cents. All right, Phil, I think we're out of time, man. Any final words of wisdom for us here today?
I'll give you a plug. This is totally unprompted, but it just is super important to track your phone calls in your marketing campaigns. So we didn't touch a ton on phone call tracking with Google Analytics, but that is the other side of tracking your marketing campaigns. You need to see what's going on on your site. If people are filling out forms. But as McKay just said, if your business relies on phone calls, you really need to know where your phone call is coming from. And it's a similar analysis that we walked through. You need to get that high-level view of total number of calls per marketing channel, and then dive a little bit deeper into that call quality. So it's a very, very similar process, and just wanted to bring that point up since we didn't really touch on it. No matter what tool you're using, you do need to keep an eye on your phone calls.
Yeah, thanks for the plug, Phil. Appreciate it. And everybody, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. We really do appreciate it. Next week we have 2 fantastic webinars as well. The first one is with a guy named Greg Hickman with an agency that specializes in mobile marketing. It's talking about how to mobilize a loyalty program with your clients with text messaging, which should be a really interesting topic. And then we're also going to have a webinar on Thursday where we actually talk a little bit about why we changed our name from Log My Calls to Convirza and some of the hurdles we had to overcome to do that, some of the surprises, things we learned. So it's kind of an interesting process. I think you'll find it instructive. So anyway, with that, thanks again. Watch for an email from us with the recording and the slides. And as always, thanks to Phil with Main Street ROI. Those guys do a great job, and I'd highly recommend you talking to them if you have any really any type of marketing question or you need a marketing service done for you. They do a great job. So, Phil, thanks again, sir, and everybody, thank you for taking the time today. Appreciate it.